Hi, this is Joe again with another review. It's not really a review, it's another sports video we'll be doing. I recently did a review last week about the story of the 2014 season. but for this video, I'm going to be discussing the screwing of the New York Mets organization. Of course, as you can tell behind me, I'm a big Mets fan. Even though I'm wearing a Cal Ripken shirt, I am a Mets fan by heart. And of course, I want to discuss this screwing of the Mets organization. And it's over the owners, but the owners screwing the players is a different, different issue, different topic for a different day. But I'm going to be discussing how the Mets are screwed by Major League Baseball. For those of you who don't know, excuse me. For those of you who don't know, the Mets came into being because the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants, after the 1957 season, moved to California. And the city of New York tried to get another major league team, or at least a national league team, into New York City. Because despite, excuse me, I just had the flu recently, so still have like maybe a touch around my system, so excuse me for it. After the Dodgers and Giants moved out, the city of New York tried to get another national team into New York. And that time, the rumor was maybe to get the Phillies to move out of Philadelphia and into New York. Of course, that deal eventually fell through, and the National League was not going to allow the current team to move to New York. Because the National League president at that time, Warren Charles, said, "Who needs New York?" That was the National League attitude. They wanted to leave New York City to the Yankees, because the Yankees were winning all the time, and so they wanted to leave it pretty much to New York. Because a lot of teams, they wanted to have like a one-team cities. And New York City at that time had 3 teams. When the Dodgers and Giants were still here, he had a 3-team in one city, which has never been done before, which has never been done since. They have 3 major league teams in one city. But of course in New York, despite the Yankees winning all the time, from the 20s to the early 60s, the Yankees were winning almost every single year, or almost every year. But despite of that, New York City has been a National League city. Despite what Yankee fans say, it's a National League town. With 2 teams, Dodgers and Giants, compared to 1 team. But in spite of that, they didn't want to have another National League team in here. So that's when Branch Rickey, who used to run the Brooklyn Dodgers, who brought Jackie Robinson to the major leagues, worked with a prominent attorney by the name of Bill Shea. Yes, it's the same Bill Shea that Shea Stadium was eventually named after. And they formed the Continental League. And they had 6 cities. Was New York, and he mentions it in the documentary that was by about the Mets called Amazing Era. And they show him in a news conference, and he says, "We're going to have New York, Houston, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Denver, and Toronto, I think another city, Montreal, to be in this league." And of course, as soon as that mentioned, the National League got scared and said, "Okay, we allow a team in New York again. We're going to expand and have 2 new teams." And they added the Mets, the team that eventually became the Mets, and the Houston Astros. And the team that eventually would become the Houston Astros into the National League. But the American League got a jump on the National League by 1 year, because the Washington Senators, when the original Washington Senators moved to Minnesota became the Twins, and they also added the Los Angeles Angels, which then became the California Angels, which then became the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, and you had a brand new Washington Senators team put in Washington, and then 11 years later they moved to Texas, and then for about like 40 or 30 some years later, they didn't have another National League team in Washington until, of course, the Expos moved Montreal to Washington and became the Nationals. But ever since getting back to the Mets since 1962 have been screwed in Major League Baseball and treated miserably in Major League Baseball. Because in the first couple of years the Mets would be bad anyway, because most of the players that the Mets got either past their prime or players who were so god awful that they wouldn't be successful, because they had an expansion draft for the Mets and the Astros, and the Astros went for young players. They weren't that successful either. But for the Mets, they purposely gave the Mets drafted these lousy players. And so for a few years they were just bad. And in 1964, when Shea Stadium opened, it was the first year of Shea Stadium, and they gave the Mets the All-Star game. And of course, as you see, behind me here, the Mets would never host another All-Star game in Shea Stadium. So that's one screw job right there. That took 49 years for the Mets to host another All-Star game. Which is one particular. I'm going to give you a little bit of brief history of the Mets and how they fought. Now I'm going to give you all the school jobs they got. One was how the players were drafted and purposely let go. Drafted, of course, naturally lousy players. There weren't any really decent players who were drafted. But in those days, you didn't have free agency, you didn't have any of that stuff. Compared to what other expansion years happened, you had free agency. But the first year that you had expansion draft where you could have free agents was when the Rockies and the Marlins came in 93. November 92, they could say free agents and sign draft players from either league, which they didn't have before. Now with the Mets, the first school job was because the All-Star game, like I mentioned. Like I said, they had in the first year of Shea Stadium in '64, which was run in the National League, and throughout these, you can pretty much say in the rest of the '70s, maybe even the early '80s, not to have an All-Star game, because they have to rotate it through the rest of the. Therefore, they have to rotate through the rest of the major leagues, the National Leagues. I can say to go like say 20 years without an All-Star game. It makes sense. Or even 25 years without an All-Star game. Of almost 50 years, 49 years without a game. Because in 1990, what a lot of people don't know was that in 1990, in between the 89 and 90 seasons, the Mets renovated Shea Stadium. They tore out the old wooden fence that's been up since the stadium opened in 1964, and they put up a padded fence. And I think the Dodgers did the same thing. The Dodgers Stadium, they tore down the old wooden fence and they put a padded fence up. And they also tore up the old turf at Shea Stadium. They tore up the old turf and put in brand new turf now. But despite all the renovations they did, they fixed it up. They did paint jobs. They did repair work wherever they needed to be repaired. But despite all that, they were supposed to have the All-Star game in 1990. But it was changed. Like in the last minute, it was changed from before the season started. It was changed from Shea Stadium to Wrigley Field. It was changed like the year. I think it was changed the year before. The reason for that was because in 1988, the lights went up in Wrigley Field. Because Wrigley Field was the last major league stadium not to have lights. So since they put lights up, Matter of fact, Major League Baseball pretty much forced them to put lights up. It's a different story. But they put lights up in Wrigley Field, and as a matter of fact, the Mets played the first official night game, and which they lost 6-4 to the Cubs. And they moved the All-Star game from Shea Stadium to Wrigley Field, because originally Shea Stadium was really going to be packed, because they were doing all these renovations to maybe get the game. And eventually, Shea Stadium never had an All-Star game in my lifetime. But I checked how many other cities had an All-Star game before the Mets had theirs, and there was like several stadiums that had like 3 times. Cities, mind you. Pacific teams had their All-Star game 3 times. Anaheim, the Angels had hosted 3 games, 67, 89, and most recently, I think like 2011, I think it was. They had 3 times. Shea Stadium only had like once in that span. And Anaheim had it 3 times. Well, hosted it 3 times. Houston also had it 3 times. Twice in the Astrodome, in 1968 and in 86. And then they had it again in 2004. So they had it 3 times. If you're talking about a real school job, get this. The Pittsburgh Pirates had 2 you were talking about the Mets had 2 All-Star games within 49 years of each other. The Pirates had 2 games within 12 years. The Mets had 2 in 50 years. That's not a school job for Major League Baseball? Come on. They had in 2000, the Pirates had the All-Star game in 94, that's before the strike. And then they had in 2006, because originally that 2006 game was supposed to be in the St. Louis, the Cardinals' new Busch Stadium, the brand new stadium were opening up in 2006. But for some reason, some screw up and with some kind of a delay or whatever the hell it was, so they moved, instead of putting it in Shea Stadium, so they put it in Shea Stadium. They didn't do that, and they put it in Pittsburgh again, because Pittsburgh had a newer stadium. Let's put it there. And if you were talking about real schooling, the 2 teams that currently play in Florida, Marlins and the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, I still call them Devil Rays, never had an All-Star game in their history. And Florida's been around since 1993. The Devil Rays have been around since 1998 and never hosted a game. Other than those 2 teams, the team that's had a previous All-Star game has the current longest streak of the Dodgers. We're going on to another school job as a schedule. The Mets always get screwed with the schedule, and the thing that ticks me off is that the Mets never complains about the schedule. Never. There was one particular year when the Mets had a schedule when they played games, I think, against the Dodgers. I think either the Dodgers or San Diego. Then they had to fly out to St. Louis for a series. Then they had to fly back to California to play. I think they played the Giants. They go from the Dodgers to stay in California playing the Giants, then go to St. Louis. They went from LA. I think they went from LA to St. Louis to San Francisco, back and forth like that on the airplane. It's crazy. I've never seen a Mets have a schedule like that in my life. And of course, and I think 2009, 2012, whatever it was, when they had the All-Star game in San Francisco. The one where Ichiro was named the MVP. He hit the very first inside the park home run in All-Star game history. They had the Mets open up the second half of the season in San Francisco. They play 4 games in San Francisco. Then they go to Arizona for a series. And then they play back to California to play the Dodgers. This year, it's almost the same thing. Because the Mets now, after the first week of the season, the Mets are going to be playing their first road trip. They're going to go to Atlanta, play the Braves, and they have to fly 3,000 miles to Anaheim to play the Angels for a weekend for 3 games. Then they have to fly from Anaheim to Arizona to play the Diamondbacks. Now, how stupid is this? Instead of going from Atlanta to Arizona to Anaheim, the stupid amazing Major to say fuck you to the Mets, they went to Atlanta, Anaheim, and Arizona. Then that was going. There are also plenty of times of how the Mets have been not given the proper credit for anything. And I mentioned this in my Ken Burns baseball series review. And Ken Burns doesn't give the Mets credit for anything. In terms of the Mets were the first expansion team to win the World Series in '69. Saying that was a fluke. The Mets won in '69. How dare they win the World Series? It was nothing but a fluke. Only the Pens be lucky enough to even get to the World Series in '73 because it was mostly on luck more than anything else. And they said, "Oh, that's a stump luck," and that's one. The Reds downplayed it, or they laid down for the Mets, and all that stuff. Give me a break. I mean, they don't want to give the Mets any credit. Or in '86, the Mets were the most hated team in baseball. I mean, teams were purposely beating Met players, destroying fights with them because they hated when Met would hit a home run at home. They'd come over for a current call, or then the next guy would get hit, or they would get they felt the Mets were like rubbing it in all the time. But the thing I got kicked out of those arguments was, oh, it's okay for other teams to rub it into the Mets. You know? And when the Mets were bad in the '70s, in the late '70s, early '80s, oh, we're going to play. They all make fun of the stadium, and of course you had people like Larry Jones on the Braves. When in '99, when the Braves beat the Mets, they had like 6 games at the end of the year. Larry Jones made a statement saying, "Oh, no, you Mets fans can put your Yankee gear on," and all that garbage. And of course, after when the Mets gave the Braves the pen on silver planet in '99, there was a National League pen. The Braves won, by the way. Don Rocker makes a statement about how you're sitting next to a person with AIDS, all these Asian people, or kind of spiked hair, and sitting next to somebody with AIDS, and welfare people with 5 kids on welfare or on the 7 train. Those of you who don't know, New York City, the 7 train is the train that goes to Shea Stadium. It's the only MTA subway line that goes to Shea Stadium, which is like about 10-minute walk from my house. That's how close I am to the 7 train. So naturally, of course, everybody got mad about calling John the racist rocker after that. And of course, now John Rocker never pitched again. He pitched for like another 2 years, 2 maybe 3 years in the major leagues, and then they don't have a job anymore in Major League Baseball. I wish Larry Jones, the same thing would happen to him. And to rub it in even more, Larry Jones named his firstborn son Shea. It's a Shea Stadium because he had so many home runs against the Mets. If he didn't play for the Mets, he wouldn't even be considered as a Hall of Famer, because that was the team that he only hits, as the Mets all the time. Same thing with any of the Braves who are going to the Hall of Fame this year. If they didn't constantly play against the Mets in the same division since '94, they wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame either. I'm telling you right now. But the biggest school job I feel that ever happened in the New York Mets history was what happened to him. Of course, if you see behind me here, with the 86 pen, and of course the Buckner River behind me and all that stuff, is what happened in 1986. And that's the biggest school job that a lot of people have forgotten. They say, how can the Mets get schooled in 86? Then they win the World Series? And he said, yeah, they won the World Series because of this picture that's behind me here. That's how they won the World Series on that. Even though the Mets had to win the 7th game for the championship. But that era that's displayed behind me, that's what won the World Series for the Mets. That one play. Because what I mean by that is going for the playoffs, when the Mets ended up playing the Astros in the playoffs, which is one of the greatest playoff series ever. The Mets were supposed. What happened was the Major League Baseball the year before, in 1985, expanded the playoffs. It's not like what it is now, where you have like 2 rounds of playoffs. I'm talking about in 1985, they only had 1 round of playoffs, and from 1969 to 1984, the playoffs was a 3 out of 5 series. And of course, a lot of people who complained about those 3 out of 5 series was the fact that people had the team that had the home field advantage had to play games 3, 4, and 5 at home. The first 2 games were in one stadium, and the other 3 games were in the other stadium. So they feel like, hey, that wasn't fair, and of course that's why they wanted more. The Major League owners wanted more money. So in 1985, they expanded the playoffs from a 3 out of 5 series to a 4 out of 7 series. In 85 was the first year they did that, with the 4 out of 7. And the teams, at that time they alternated the playoffs. I mean, there's one, because it made it easier because it was 2 divisions then, in those days. Until 1994, Major League Baseball was, from 1969 to 1993, Major League Baseball had 2 divisions. So it made it easier for baseball to alternate the playoffs. So it doesn't matter what, if you have best record in the league or not, they alternated the playoffs. And one year the Eastern Division team had the home field. The next year the Western Division. Well, 85, they picked, because I think the 85 was due anyway, that the Western Division team would have home field advantage anyway. So of course in 85 you had the Dodgers in the National League, and the Royals in the American League had the home field advantage. It means the first 2 games and the last 2 games in both Kansas City and LA had the playoff games. The first 2 games and the last 2 games. In the middle of 3, in the Eastern Division, Champions Stadium. So of course the next year, you know that the Eastern Division teams, which happened to be the Red Sox and the Mets, would have home field advantage in the playoffs. Well, eventually became the Red Sox and the Mets. I mean, the season worked out. So I'm figuring, okay, great, the Mets will have home field advantage. It will be the first time in Met history they will host the very first game of not only the playoffs, but in the World Series as well. Because they played the two times before, in 69 and 73, and the Mets did not have home field advantage in the playoffs because it was the 3 out of 5. In the final 3 games in Shea. But in the World Series, the Mets did not have home field advantage in either one of the 2 World Series they played before. So the Mets made it to the World Series. The first time they were going to start the World Series at Shea. But the problem was when the Mets had Game 4, when the series started on Wednesday night. The Red Sox Angels series started on Tuesday night, and the Mets Astros series started on Wednesday night, the first game. And of course, the way it worked out was that Wednesday and Thursday was supposed to be in Shea. Friday, the travel day to Houston. And Saturday, Sunday, and Monday will be in Houston. Game 3, 4, and 5. Tuesday, a day off. Then game 6 and 7, which was on Wednesday and Thursday, is going to be played in shape. The problem was, that was the original schedule was. The problem was that game 4 of the playoffs, which was scheduled on a Sunday, the Houston Oilers, who are now the Tennessee Titans, for all you football fans out there, had a home game scheduled during the 4th game. So the NFL came in, and the NFL was not going to move the game to accommodate the Astros in the playoffs. Despite the fact that Texas is a football state, primarily, more than baseball, they're a football state. They got football stadiums all over the damn state. All these college stadiums and everything else, they could move the game to a college state, to one of the college stadiums. But like I said, they were not going to accommodate baseball playoffs. So they said, hey, we're not moving our game. You move your game. You move your series. So the commissioner of baseball at that time told National President Joe Feeney, who since passed away, to flip the playoffs. In other words, instead of the Mets getting home field, the Astros got home field. It nearly cost the Mets the playoffs. It worked out. But two of the 4 games the Mets won were at Shea Stadium and in the last at bat. But just dumb luck how it worked out that way. But it just worked out like that. But still, it still should not have happened. As a matter of fact, for those of you guys who look, you can see a video of me asking Keith. That's the first video of me on YouTube asking Keith Hernandez in a Q&A that question. And of course, Keith Hernandez made a joke out of it. He said, "Oh, we won anyway." True, but it still should not have happened. But should have had home field at the Astros that year. And that fact has been forgotten over the years. For those of you who want to look for that video, you have to look Keith Hernandez Q&A. And you see, you know what? I did post a video of myself that I shot of Keith in that Q&A at City Field 2 years, slightly more than 2 years ago. But I kind of shot a video of me asking Keith that question because I did ask him. I think that was the first question that was asked in that session. And so Keith made a joke out of it. They won anyway. But still, I asked him how come none of the players or management made a stink over the fact that, they were supposed to have home field and they got screwed out of it over a football game. The guys got stepped over. And he says, well, we won anyway. So it didn't matter. That's why I know it doesn't matter now, all these years later, but still, as a Mets fan, I was angry over the fact that the Mets, supposed to have home field, and didn't get it. And of course, he didn't really answer the question the way I wanted to answer it. And of course, the guy who shot the video wanted to know why, and I told him why. And he says, "Oh, no, whatever." I said, "Oh, that's the reason." I said, "Yeah, it's not like it is now. If you have the best record, you get, the home field today. That time, in those days, you didn't have it. Doesn't matter if you have best record or not. They alternated the playoffs. Now all of a sudden, they changed the rules and best record, you get home field." But of course, also another thing too that a lot of people don't say today. But then was the problem. Now in most of the stadiums, at least half the stadiums, more than half the stadiums at that time, was the home of 2 teams. A baseball team and a football team. You see, you had Atlanta. You had even the Mets for a while. Not by 1986, but by maybe from 64 to 83. The Mets shared the stadium with the Jets. You had the Phillies. She had this famous stadium with the Eagles. Pittsburgh. Minnesota. You had Houston, of course, which I mentioned. You had the Angels. She had the same with the LA Rams at the time. San Diego with the Padres and the Chargers. And the Chargers still playing that stadium in Jack Murphy Stadium. You had, of course, San Francisco with the Giants and the 49ers. As a matter of fact, the 49ers just played the last game in Candlestick Park. You also had, of course, in Toronto, you have the Blue Jays sharing the team with the Toronto Argonauts, which is from the Canadian Football League. Well, of course, since then, and of course, and also, I forgot Cleveland, with the Browns and the original Cleveland Browns and the Cleveland Indians. But of course, since then, that hasn't been a problem. Because now, except for where Oakland's concerned, and now Oakland's trying to get a new stadium for the baseball team. Oakland is the only team that shares the stadium with the football team. That's it. Everybody else now has a separate stadium for the baseball team and the football team. Which now, you don't have that problem anymore. Well, yeah, I also forgot to mention Baltimore. With the Baltimore Colts and the Baltimore Orioles. But now they have two separate teams, two separate stadiums for the football team and the baseball team. In New York City, we don't worry about that because in New York City we don't have a football team anymore. Two so-called quote-unquote New York teams play in a separate state, New Jersey. New Jersey Giants and the New Jersey Jets. But in terms of, that type of thing they have with the Mets in 86 is never going to happen again. Thank God. But in terms of the regular season that happened to the Twins, because the Twins played an 11 o'clock game to accommodate, because we were having a college football game that night, and the game went to extra innings, and the game had to end because the game got going, so they had to cut it off at a certain time to get the field ready for a college football game. And of course, the Twins management got so upset that they, forced the state of Minnesota to get a their own separate baseball stadium, which they did, and that's where the 2014 All-Star game will be. Well, that's my video of how the Mets got screwed. I know it was a little bit long, but that's how long the Mets have been getting screwed by. The separate video we're going to do is how the Mets ownership screws the players. I might do that next. Well, thank you for watching. Please click the video. Please comment on. Please subscribe to my channel. And thanks for watching.